David Johnson lived a life of luxury, but it was filled with emptiness since the loss of his wife, Sarah. The car accident that took her away destroyed the joy that once filled their home. David, a successful CEO in the technology sector, buried himself in work, trying to fill the void left by Sarah's absence. His mother, Margaret Scott, was a constant presence in his life, always concerned about her grandson, Ethan, who was only 10 years old. "David, Ethan needs a mother," Margaret often said, trying to convince her son to open his heart again. Margaret knew that David was trying hard to be a good father, but the emptiness was visible. Ethan, a sweet and curious boy, felt the absence of his mother and the emotional distance of his father. Despite David being physically present, his mind was always distracted with the company and his responsibilities. "Dad, do you think Mom is happy where she is?" Ethan would ask, his eyes filled with innocence and longing. David always responded with a sad smile. "Yes, my son. She is watching over us from above." Weekends were the worst for David. Without the refuge of work, he was confronted by Sarah's absence in every corner of the house. Margaret did her best to help, organizing outings and activities for Ethan, trying to bring some normalcy to her grandson's life. "Shall we go to the park today, Ethan?" she would suggest, trying to cheer the boy up. Ethan would agree with a smile, but the sparkle in his eyes was no longer the same. Despite Margaret's support, David knew that something needed to change. He couldn't continue living in the past, trapped by pain and guilt. "Mom, I think I need help," he confessed to her one evening as they watched Ethan play in the backyard. Margaret smiled, hopeful. "David, recognizing this is already a big step. Sarah would want you to find happiness again." Over time, David began to consider the idea of opening his heart. He knew that finding a new mother for Ethan didn't mean forgetting Sarah, but honoring her memory by providing their son with a complete and loving family. Margaret continued to encourage him. "You deserve to be happy, my son, and so does Ethan." These words resonated in David's mind, planting the seed of a possible change. Even so, David still felt hesitant. The idea of letting someone else into his life was frightening. He feared that no one could replace Sarah or understand the depth of his pain. But, looking at Ethan, he knew he had to try for his son's sake. "I will do this for him," David decided, promising himself that he would do his best to find happiness again. David's decision to open himself up to new possibilities was a milestone in his journey of overcoming grief. He began attending social events and interacting more with his colleagues, seeking a connection that could bring new meaning to his life. Ethan, in turn, observed these changes with curiosity and hope. "Dad, you seem different," he commented one day, noticing his father's effort to be more present and cheerful. Margaret remained a cornerstone in David's recovery process. With her support and encouragement, he began to see a light at the end of the tunnel. The hope of a better future, both for himself and for Ethan, was beginning to take shape. During a renovation in his office, David Johnson met Emily, a friendly interior designer. She was a novice professional, but her enthusiasm and creativity were contagious. From their first meeting, David felt drawn to the way Emily saw the world. "You have a gift for transforming spaces," he remarked, watching her work. Emily smiled shyly. "Thank you, David. I like to think I'm bringing a bit of joy to each project." The following week was revealing for David. He realized that Emily was not only talented, but also possessed a kind and empathetic soul. Their conversations extended beyond work, covering personal topics and future dreams. "Have you ever thought about living outside the city?" Emily asked one day as they chose colors for the walls. David laughed. "Maybe someday. For now, I'm focused on creating a safe and happy environment for Ethan." Emily quickly grew close to Ethan, who was curious about the new presence in their lives. She had a natural ability to deal with children, and David noticed this. Ethan loved listening to the stories Emily told about her childhood adventures. "Did you know I once got lost in an amusement park?" she recounted, as Ethan listened with wide eyes. "Really? How did you get out?" he asked, fascinated. The following months were decisive for David. He realized that Emily not only filled the void left by Sarah, but also brought a new light into their lives. One day, while walking in the park, David held Emily's hand and said, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Emily was moved, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. "I do too, David," she replied, accepting his marriage proposal. David and Emily's engagement brought a new dynamic to the family. Margaret, always supportive, was delighted with the news. "Emily is a blessing, David. I'm sure Sarah is happy for you," she said, hugging her son. Ethan, in turn, was excited about the idea of having Emily officially as part of their lives. "Am I going to have a new mom?" he asked, and David replied with a smile, "Yes, my son. Emily loves us very much." Wedding preparations began, and David's house was filled with vibrant and positive energy. Emily got involved in every detail, ensuring that the event reflected the love and unity they shared. "I want our wedding to be a symbol of a new beginning," she said as they chose the flowers. David agreed, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. During this period, the relationship between Emily and Ethan grew even stronger. They spent hours together, whether playing in the backyard or reading stories before bedtime. "Emily, can you teach me to draw?" Ethan asked one day. Emily smiled, picking up pencils and paper. "Of course, Ethan. Let's create something amazing together." These moments brought renewed joy to the house, filling the days with laughter and love. As the wedding approached, David reflected on how much his life had changed since meeting Emily. He felt that he had finally found a path to happiness and overcoming grief. With Emily by his side and Ethan in his care, David was ready to face any challenge the future might bring. Shortly after the engagement, Ethan began to fall ill frequently. The boy, usually full of energy, now seemed fragile and weary. David watched, worried, while Emily tried to find an explanation. "David, I think we need to take Ethan to the hospital for a full checkup," she suggested. David, although reluctant, knew Emily was right. "All right, let's schedule an appointment," he responded, trying to hide his anxiety. During the hospital visit, the doctors conducted a series of tests on Ethan. While waiting for the results, David couldn't hide his concern. "What if it's something serious, Emily?" he asked, holding her hand tightly. Emily, remaining calm, replied, "Let's wait for the results and deal with whatever comes. One step at a time. We're in this together, David." Her tranquility helped ease some of David's tension. The test results revealed that Ethan had a weakened immune system, making him susceptible to infections. "We need to improve his diet and ensure he takes all the necessary supplements," the doctor explained. David felt a mix of relief and worry. At least now they knew what was happening, but the road to recovery would be long. "We'll do whatever it takes," he declared, determined. Emily began researching treatments and alternative therapies that could help Ethan recover his health. "I found some special diets and natural therapies that might strengthen his immune system," she said, showing her findings to David. He was impressed by Emily's effort and dedication. "Thank you for caring so much about him," David said, hugging her. "Ethan is like a son to me," Emily responded sincerely. Over time, the new routine began to show results. Ethan started to regain some of his energy, although he still needed constant care. "Dad, I feel a bit better today," he said one day, as David prepared his special breakfast. "That's great, son. Let's keep it up," David replied, feeling a glimmer of hope. Each small progress was a victory that brought relief and joy to the family. Emily spared no effort to ensure Ethan received the best possible treatment. She arranged visits to specialists and even holistic therapy sessions. "Health is a balance between body and mind," she explained to David. He admired her dedication and the positive impact she was having on Ethan's life. "You're really making a difference," he said, gratitude in his eyes. "We're all in this together, David," Emily replied, resolutely. Through these challenges, David and Emily grew even closer. The nights they spent awake, worried about Ethan's health, became moments of profound support and companionship. With Ethan's gradual improvement, the family began to envision a more promising future. The difficult days were not over, but the hope and love that united them proved stronger than ever. David was grateful to have Emily and Ethan in his life, and the promise of a new beginning had never felt so real. "We're on the right path," David thought, confident that together, they could overcome any adversity that fate brought their way. One day, while driving to work, David nearly hit a young woman. Instinctively, he braked sharply and ran to help her. The young woman, in shock, thanked him repeatedly. "You saved my life. I don't know how to thank you," she said, still trembling. David, painfully reminded of the accident that took Sarah, felt a wave of emotions. "It's all right. I'm just glad you're safe," he replied, trying to control his voice. After helping Rachel compose herself, David discovered that she was pregnant and facing financial difficulties. "I'm trying to find a job, but it's been hard," Rachel confessed, tears in her eyes. David felt immediate empathy for her. "I want to help you. What is your profession?" he asked. "I'm a trained nurse," she replied, hopeful. David smiled, barely believing what was happening. "You will be a great help to us," he said, explaining his son's situation. David decided to hire Rachel as a caregiver for Ethan. Rachel, grateful for the opportunity, promised to do her best. "I will do everything I can to help Ethan," she assured, determined. Rachel's arrival brought a new dynamic to the house. Ethan, curious and a bit shy at first, soon grew fond of her. "Will you take care of me, Rachel?" he asked. "Yes, Ethan. I will take very good care of you," she replied with a warm smile. Days passed, and Rachel's presence began to make a significant difference in Ethan's life. She implemented new care methods and devoted her full attention to his well-being. "You're doing great, Ethan," Rachel praised as he completed another physical therapy exercise. David watched, moved. "Thank you, Rachel. You have truly been a blessing to us," he said, feeling relieved to see his son's improvement. Despite Ethan's progress, Rachel's presence caused some tension in the house. Emily started treating her with coldness and distrust. "I don't know if we can trust her that much," Emily told David. However, he defended Rachel, recognizing how much she was helping Ethan. "She has been doing an excellent job, Emily. We should give her the benefit of the doubt," he argued, trying to maintain peace. But Emily was not easily convinced. Rachel, sensing Emily's hostility, tried not to let it affect her. She focused on her work and Ethan's well-being, avoiding unnecessary confrontations. "I just want to help," she thought, determined to prove her worth. Aware of the tension, David talked to Rachel. "I'm sorry about Emily's behavior. She's just worried," he explained. Rachel, understanding, replied, "I understand, David. I'll keep doing my best for Ethan." Over time, even Emily began to notice Rachel's dedication. Although there was still some distrust, Ethan's continuous improvement couldn't be ignored. "She really cares about him," Emily admitted to David reluctantly. "Yes, she does," he agreed, feeling that they were finally starting to understand each other. But the tension still hung in the air, like a storm about to break. The tension in the house began to escalate as Emily grew increasingly distrustful and jealous of Rachel. Their interactions were often cold and distant. "David, I don't feel comfortable with Rachel here," Emily said, trying to control her irritation. David, concerned, tried to mediate the situation. "Emily, she has been crucial to Ethan's improvement. We need to work together," he argued, feeling his frustration grow. Rachel, in turn, felt increasingly isolated. She dedicated all her time and energy to taking care of Ethan, but couldn't shake the feeling of being unwanted. "I just want to help," she thought while preparing Ethan's medication. One day, as she entered the kitchen, she overheard Emily speaking to David in a heated tone. "She's meddling too much, David. We need to think about our future," Emily said, casting a severe look at Rachel. David began to realize that Emily's distrust was rooted in something deeper. "Emily, why are you so worried about Rachel? Is there something I should know?" he asked, trying to understand. Emily, hesitant, looked away. "I just want to protect our family, David," she replied, not giving many details. But David knew there was more to the story, and it began to sow doubts in his mind. The atmosphere in the house remained tense, and Ethan, sensitive to the changes, started asking questions. "Dad, why is Emily always mad at Rachel?" David tried to reassure him, saying, "Sometimes adults have disagreements, but we'll sort it out, I promise." However, the tension only increased, and David needed to find a solution before the situation got out of hand. He decided to talk directly to Rachel about the situation. "Rachel, I need to be honest with you. Emily has raised concerns about your presence here," David said, trying to be delicate. Rachel, surprised, responded calmly, "David, I'm here to help Ethan. If at any point my presence becomes a problem, I can leave." But David knew that wasn't a solution. "I don't want you to leave, Rachel. You've been amazing with Ethan," he said, unsure of the next step. Emily, seeing that David was starting to support Rachel more, felt even more isolated. "He's choosing her over me," she thought bitterly. The distrust turned into resentment, and she began planning how to make David see Rachel differently. "I'll prove that I'm right," she decided. One afternoon, while Ethan was playing in the backyard, he mysteriously disappeared. David, noticing the unusual silence, ran to the yard only to find the swing empty and no sign of his son. "Ethan! Ethan!" he shouted, his voice filled with panic. Emily and Rachel ran over when they heard David's screams. "What happened?" Emily asked, her concern evident. "Ethan is gone," David replied, feeling a growing sense of despair. David immediately called the police, and a frantic search began. Officers scoured the neighborhood while David, Emily, and Rachel joined the volunteers. "We have to find him," David said, his voice trembling. Rachel, with tears in her eyes, tried to comfort him. "We'll find him, David. Ethan is strong," she said, trying to keep hope alive. But every minute without news felt like an eternity. During the search, Emily started accusing Rachel, fueling the suspicions she had already planted. "I knew we couldn't trust her. She must have something to do with this," Emily asserted with a certainty that shook David. "Emily, this is not the time for baseless accusations. We need to focus on finding Ethan," he responded, trying to stay calm. But Emily's words sowed doubts, leaving David torn. Rachel, feeling the weight of the accusations, tried to defend herself. "I would never do anything to hurt Ethan. He's like a son to me," she said, desperate. David, seeing the genuine despair in Rachel's eyes, wanted to believe her, but the circumstances were incredibly complicated. "We need evidence, we need answers," he thought, trying to find logic amidst the chaos. The pressure mounted with each passing second. As the search continued, clues began to emerge. Witnesses reported seeing a strange car near the house at the time Ethan disappeared. "This could be a lead," one of the officers said, bringing a ray of hope. The police intensified the investigation, analyzing security cameras and collecting testimonies. David, with a heavy heart, tried to keep hope alive. "We'll find you, my son," he promised silently. Emily, however, continued to push the narrative against Rachel. "She must be involved. It's too much of a coincidence," she repeated, trying to convince David. But Rachel, determined to prove her innocence, began searching for her own answers. "I won't let these accusations go unanswered," she thought, mentally reviewing every detail of the day. The tension between them grew, threatening to explode at any moment. The search finally led to a crucial discovery. A neighbor recalled seeing Ethan with an unknown man, getting into a black car. He seemed reluctant, but the man convinced him, the neighbor told the police. With this new lead, the police began to trace the possible route of the car. David felt his anxiety and fear grow, but also a spark of hope. "We're getting closer," he thought, his heart tight with anticipation. During the search, David stumbled upon a shocking revelation. While rummaging through some papers in Emily's office, he found an old letter from a man named Marco, who clearly had a dark past. "Emily, who is Marco?" David asked, holding the letter in front of her. Emily, visibly tense, tried to deflect. "He's just someone from my past. It doesn't matter," she replied, nervous. But David knew there was more to the story. Pressed by David, Emily finally confessed. Marco was my boyfriend years ago. He got involved in criminal activities, and I distanced myself when I found out," she said, her voice trembling. David felt a mixture of anger and disbelief. "And you thought this wasn't important to share with me?" he asked, trying to control his fury. Emily tried to justify herself. "I didn't want this to interfere with our life, David. I thought he had disappeared forever," she explained, but her words felt hollow. The revelation made David question if Emily could be involved in Ethan's disappearance. She might have helped Marco kidnap Ethan, he thought, horrified. Confronting her directly, he asked, "Emily, are you involved in this? Did you help Marco take Ethan?" Emily, scared and with tears in her eyes, vehemently denied it. "No, David, I would never do that," she asserted. But David didn't know who to trust anymore. The police were informed about the new discovery, and they intensified the search for Marco. Meanwhile, David struggled with a whirlwind of emotions. If Emily isn't directly involved, why didn't she tell me about Marco before? He wondered, trying to understand the complexity of the situation. Emily, realizing her omission had destroyed David's trust, desperately tried to make amends. "David, I just wanted to forget that dark past. I love you and I love Ethan," she pleaded, but her words fell on deaf ears. Rachel, closely following the developments, offered support to David. "We will find Ethan, David. I believe in you," she said, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. David felt torn between distrust in Emily and gratitude for Rachel. "Thank you, Rachel. We need to keep looking," he replied, determined to bring Ethan back. The new information about Marco gave the police a new direction to follow. The investigation led to an old abandoned warehouse where witnesses had seen suspicious activities. The police surrounded the area, and David watched closely, his heart pounding. Ethan might be there, he thought, anxious. As the police prepared to raid the warehouse, Emily, desperate to prove her innocence, approached David. "Let me help. I want to bring Ethan back as much as you do," she said. But David couldn't forget the lies and omissions. Inside the warehouse, the police found evidence that Ethan had been there recently. Toys and clothes that belonged to the boy were scattered around, but there was no sign of him or Marco. "We're close," one of the officers told David, trying to give him hope. David, however, was at his limit. "We have to find him now," he said, his voice full of urgency and desperation. Time was running out, and every second counted. With the clues leading to a new location, the police, David, and even Emily and Rachel headed to a remote area. The pressure was mounting, and everyone knew this could be the last chance to find Ethan. Realizing that David was beginning to suspect her, Emily planned to frame Rachel. Back at the house, she placed Ethan's personal items among Rachel's belongings, creating a narrative that pointed to the caregiver's guilt. David needs to see that Rachel isn't trustworthy, Emily thought. Rachel accidentally discovered Emily's plan. While searching for clues, she found Ethan's belongings that Emily had planted. "This doesn't make sense. How did these things get here?" she thought, trying to understand how the items ended up in her possession. Putting the pieces together, she realized she was being framed. "Emily is trying to incriminate me," she concluded, shocked. Determined to reveal the truth, she knew she had to act cautiously. Rachel confronted Emily at a moment of peak tension. "Emily, I know what you're doing," she said, facing her directly. Emily, surprised and frightened, tried to deny it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied, but her voice trembled. Rachel, with firmness, continued, "You're trying to frame me to divert attention from yourself. I won't let that happen." The intense argument caught David's attention, and he entered the room, confused and concerned. "Rachel, what's going on?" David asked, seeing the two women in confrontation. Rachel explained everything she had discovered, showing the evidence planted by Emily. "David, she's trying to make me look guilty to hide something," Rachel stated, holding the proof in her hands. David, stunned, looked at Emily, expecting an explanation. Emily, realizing she was cornered, finally gave in. "David, I just wanted to get rid of Rachel because I thought she was a threat, Emily confessed, with tears in her eyes. But I'm not involved in Ethan's kidnapping. I swear. David felt torn between anger and compassion. Why did you do this, Emily? We should be in this together, he said, frustrated. Emily, sobbing, responded, I was scared of losing you and Ethan. I didn't think about the consequences. With the truth out, David and Rachel teamed up to find more evidence against Emily and her former boyfriend, Marco. They reviewed the neighbors' security cameras and, to their surprise, found footage of Emily leaving with Ethan and Marco. She was involved from the start, David concluded, feeling a wave of despair. Armed with this evidence, they contacted the police, who acted quickly. Emily was arrested at home, and during the interrogation, she confessed that she only wanted to frame Rachel. But Marco took the kidnapping to another level. Emily admitted that her intention was only to scare David so that he would doubt Rachel and distance himself from her. I didn't know Marco would go that far, she said, remorseful. David, though still shaken, felt a mix of sadness and anger. The police, armed with the new evidence, acted swiftly. They located Marco's hideout, an old warehouse outside the city. As they approached the site, they found more evidence directly linking Emily and Marco to the kidnapping. We have everything we need to incriminate them, said the detective in charge of the case, assuring David that justice would be served. The rescue of Ethan was a moment of tension and relief. When the police stormed the warehouse, they found Marco and Ethan. There was a brief exchange of gunfire, and amidst the chaos, Rachel stood out as the true heroine. Ethan, stay behind me, she shouted, shielding the boy with her own body. The desperate criminal fired in their direction, and Rachel was hit while protecting Ethan. The bullet struck her shoulder, but she remained calm, holding Ethan close to protect him. Stay down, Ethan, she whispered, feeling the intense pain spread. David, seeing the scene, felt his heart tighten with despair and gratitude. Rachel, he shouted, running to help her while trying to keep Ethan safe. The rescue team acted quickly, managing to control the situation and neutralize the criminal. When the shooting stopped, David rushed to Rachel and Ethan. Are you okay, son? He asked, holding Ethan tightly. Yes, Dad, but Rachel is hurt, he replied, his eyes full of concern. David, with tears in his eyes, looked at Rachel, who was pale but trying to smile. You're so brave, Rachel. We'll take care of you now, he said, holding her hand. Rachel was rushed to the hospital, where she underwent surgery to remove the bullet and treat her wounds. David and Ethan waited anxiously for news, their minds filled with worry and gratitude. She saved my life, Dad, Ethan repeated, hugging his father. I know, son, and we'll be here for her, just like she was for us, David replied, determined to repay Rachel's sacrifice. After the surgery, the doctors informed that Rachel was out of danger, and the baby she was expecting was not at risk, but she would need time to fully recover. She's a strong woman, said the doctor, trying to reassure David. Thank you, doctor, he replied, feeling a wave of relief. Ethan, hearing the news, smiled timidly. Is Rachel going to be okay? He asked. Yes, son. She will be okay, David confirmed, hugging him tightly. David and Ethan visited Rachel every day in the hospital, bringing flowers and small gifts to cheer her up. You don't have to do this, Rachel said, moved. You are part of our family, Rachel. It's the least we can do, David replied, feeling love and gratitude grow each day. With their constant support, Rachel began to recover faster than the doctors had anticipated. During her recovery, Rachel and David talked a lot about the future. I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done, David said, holding her hand. I did what anyone would do for someone they love, Rachel replied sincerely. These moments further strengthened the bond between them, transforming respect and admiration into a deep and genuine love. Rachel's sacrifice not only saved Ethan's life, but also united the family in a way none of them could have foreseen. Finally, when Rachel was discharged from the hospital, she was officially invited by David to live with them and continue caring for Ethan. I would love to, she replied, moved. With Emily in custody, she confessed that she only wanted to scare David so that he would doubt Rachel and distance himself from her. I never thought Marco would take the kidnapping so seriously, Emily said, tears in her eyes, during her interrogation. She admitted that her ex-boyfriend planned to extort money from David and that things got out of control. David, upon hearing this, felt a mix of anger and sadness. "You put our child's life at risk," he said, incredulous. David and Rachel began to rebuild their lives. Rachel, still recovering from her injuries, was welcomed with love and care by David and Ethan. "We'll take care of you, Rachel, just like you took care of us," David promised, holding her hand. Rachel, moved, felt part of a true family. Each day brought a new beginning, a step towards healing and happiness. Over time, the relationship between David and Rachel blossomed. They began to fall in love deeply and genuinely, strengthened by the challenges they faced together. "I couldn't imagine my life without you," David confessed during a romantic dinner. "Neither could I, David. You and Ethan are my family now," Rachel replied, her eyes shining with love. The bond they built was unbreakable. David helped Rachel recover from her injuries. "You saved me, Rachel, in every sense," he said as he tended to her. "And you gave me a reason to keep going," she replied, grateful. The journey of overcoming brought a new understanding and mutual respect, creating a solid foundation for the future. David's house, once filled with shadows of the past, was now illuminated with joy and hope. Rachel brought a new energy, filling the days with laughter and love. "You brought the light back into our lives," said Margaret, David's mother, during a visit. "We're happy again," David agreed, feeling that they were finally where they were meant to be. Rachel's presence transformed the lives of everyone around her. David and Rachel began planning the future, including shared dreams and goals. "I want our family to be happy and safe," David said during a walk with Rachel. "And I want to build a home where everyone feels loved and valued," Rachel responded. Together, they started working on their plans, with Ethan always at the center of their decisions. "We are a team," David would say, reaffirming his commitment. David, Ethan, Rachel, and the baby on the way were now closer than ever, knowing that the future held many adventures and happy moments. "We're ready for anything," David said confidently. "Yes, together we are invincible," Rachel added, sealing the commitment of love and unity they shared.